everyone. My name is Dr. Bethany Vibbert, and I'm a clinical psychologist at the Child Mind Institute. We're a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care, advice, and resources, all online, accessible to everyone. We are here for you wherever you are with expert telehealth resources, including diagnosis and treatment of mental health and learning disorders, group programs for anxiety, mood disorders, ADHD, and more, and remote neuropsychological evaluations. Please visit childmind.org/telehealth to learn more. With protests over the violent deaths of Black Americans dominating the news, it's understandable that many kids are feeling scared, confused, or angry about the situation. We are all thinking about racism and violence and how to raise caring children and talk to them about what's happening in our society. We are happy to try to answer all of your questions about whatever parenting challenges you have and anxieties that you are facing yourselves. Today, I'd like to talk about autism and the rules of reopening and answer your questions about that and anything else you're wondering about. Post your questions in the feed, and we'll also post some helpful links and resources on childmind.org. Remember, we're here every day and we look through your questions daily. So if we don't have a chance to get to any of your questions, we'll certainly look through them and try to address them in the future. So as you guys get started posting in the feed today, I have a few questions that have already trickled in and that we've been saving up from other posts. So I think I'll dive right in. One question that we continue to get time and time again is about wearing a mask. One parent wrote into us, "My son will not wear a mask. Even talking about it is an instant meltdown. He hates the way they feel. What can I do?" I think this is a great question because wearing a mask is becoming more of an integral part of our kind of day-to-day living in society. And frankly, it's not easy for adults to wear a mask, let alone children, and especially children who may have sensory differences or process sensory experiences differently. So it's really important that we approach these topics cautiously and we plan ahead. First, I think it's really important to try to explain the situation coming up. It sounds like from this parent, they've already sort of tried to approach it and maybe it hasn't gone so well, and that's okay. We can start over. So start by just explaining the situation and exposing your child to mask wearing. There are actually some great cartoons out right now. I think PBS Kids Hour did something special with the cartoon characters wearing masks. So there's ways to kind of expose your child to mask wearing without actually forcing them to put on a mask. Another way that you can expose your child to mask wearing without having them put a mask on immediately is using things like social stories or visual cues. Getting them familiar with just the fact that people are wearing masks in general and everybody is doing it. A social story is also a really good way to help explain the situation. Social stories are great because they're really designed to be clear, concise, and factual, and that's exactly the kind of information you want to give your child. Being honest about the situation. Masks protect us from germs, and when we go outside, we have to wear a mask. Or when we go in stores, we have to wear a mask. This will just help your child understand the rules. You have to be very direct and tell them exactly what you expect of them. For example, anytime we're in a store, you have to wear a mask, rather than being vague. Being direct and clear will set those expectations from the get-go. Then I think it's also important to practice and working your practice up, scaffolding. So expecting that your child will put a mask on right away is probably expecting a little bit too much, especially if your child has sensory differences or doesn't like the feeling or texture of certain things. It's quite important that you practice. It may be helpful to test out different types of masks to see if maybe they don't like the feeling of the mask going behind their ear, and maybe finding one that ties behind their head is going to be better for your child. Without practice, without trying to put it on and exposing them to maybe different sorts of masks and different kinds of things, you'll never be able to find that out. That kind of leads me into my next point. Try to understand what's difficult for your child about it. Is it that their face is covered, or maybe their mouth, the fabric is too close to their mouth? Again, maybe it's something going behind their ears. It's going to be different for every child. Maybe it's just the exact texture of the mask. There's cotton masks, there's surgical masks, there's all sorts of different types of masks out there. So trying to work with your child to find one that they like, that works for them, is going to be really important. And you're not going to be able to get there without practice and some exposure to different types of masks and various sorts of masks. So I think that's a really good place to start. Next, try to really reward desired behaviors. So perhaps if your child refuses to even put a mask on, maybe if they're able to sit with a mask next to them while they do their favorite activity for 2 minutes without having a temper tantrum, you reward that activity. You reward that behavior by extending their favorite activity. Slowly but surely working your way up to them maybe wearing the mask during the activity. For example, if they really like playing video games, they can wear the mask while they play video games. Pairing this with something that's highly desired will decrease, hopefully, the negative feelings and connotation about the mask. Then you can also use visual support. So if you're only asking them to wear it for 30 seconds while they play their video game and the rest of the time they can take it off, have a timer and have it have 30-second countdown, and then they can take it off and reward that behavior with continued game playing. Little tricks like that, like pairing it with a desired object and then working up, building it into longer aspects of their life, are going to be really important. I think then you can work your way up to going out in public or just starting out maybe in your backyard. Wearing a mask in heat as the summer months come on is very different than maybe wearing it when the months were cooler before. And again, it takes practice. I know just from personal experience, when it's hot, it can be very uncomfortable to have a mask on. And I know I have to think about before I go into a store with my mask on, maybe I wiped my face off first and then put the mask back on before entering that store. And kind of having those little tricks to think about ahead of and in advance of needing to wear a mask for your child are going to be helpful. Then you can really plan out with them what the expectations are. So maybe they don't need to wear a mask while they're in the car, and maybe they don't even need to wear a mask when they're in the parking lot, but they have to put the mask on before they go in the store. Or maybe it's easier for you and your child to have the rule that when they leave the house, they put a mask on. This might vary, and it's going to really depend on what kind of rules and guidelines your child can handle. The best course of action is to be simple and concise. So starting out just you have to wear a mask when you leave the house might be the best way of starting. Then you're not kind of negotiating and varying the rules and changing it up on them. So I think that those are some really important places to start. And I think that it's important, especially maybe if your child's already also upset about it, if you've tried to introduce the mask and it didn't go so well, maybe calling it something else. The word mask might just be triggering for them at this point, and so maybe we start calling it a face covering, and we talk about why it's important to wear face coverings, and maybe finding one that they like, really engaging them in the process. There's a lot of really cute masks with fabric on them, and maybe finding a fabric or a pattern that really aligns with your child's special interest or strong interest is going to be really helpful. Maybe they have a Batman mask if Batman is their favorite character, and you can really find that. I think that engaging them in that process might end up resulting in them being more likely to wear the mask or having it around, and then you can really work up to having to wear it longer term in public. And I think that, again, rewarding those desired behaviors. So the first time you go in public, saying, if you can wear it throughout the store, I'll buy you a treat at the end. Or maybe you get to pick out a little thing from the dollar section at Target or something for your child. You can also incorporate things like a token system. So maybe for every minute they wear it in the house, they get a token. So then when they go out, they also get to get tokens when they're wearing it for every minute outside of the house, and they can purchase a good or an item while you guys are out. So making it a fun, rewarding, enjoyable experience and figuring out how to talk about it so that the child won't get upset is going to be key, especially if you're already having meltdowns and you're already having a hard time doing that. I think that really working on reframing it for them, starting over, building it up with their favorite characters, also just, again, trying to understand maybe what they don't like so much about the mask so that you can adjust it. Like I said, it may be very easy, for example, to just get a mask that ties around their head, or maybe you're getting one that ties to a special hat that they like to wear or something, so that it's not really behind their ears for any length of time if that's what's bothering them. So I would really urge you to get creative, and as you're practicing, pay attention to the little things that might be bothering them or setting them off, and trying to adjust those things as best you can. What's, I think, really great too is that there are a lot of great social stories being developed for mask wearing right now, and I think that that's a really great way of really previewing masks, explaining why it's important, and just practicing exposing them to masks without actually having the demand that they wear one yet. It may be that the demand hand comes up pretty quickly for them, but I would urge you to try as early as possible, really introducing these concepts to your child. So hopefully that's helpful and some good pointers for how you can really get started on that mask wearing process. I know that, every child is going to be different. Every child is going to have a different response or reaction to wearing a mask. And it's important to kind of adjust and really try to understand what it is about the mask that's bothering your child. You know your child best, and I think that practicing can really help you figure that out. So hopefully that was helpful. And again, we've gotten this question so many times, so I think this is something that a lot of parents are struggling with, and it's a great question because it is something that is just becoming a part of our everyday lives, and we all need to adjust to that and figure out what we're going to do about that. We have another question here actually coming in, and I think that again, this is a very good question and one that I'm facing with many of my patients right now and a lot of our clinic patients that we're seeing. This parent writes, "My daughter does not tolerate change in routine well. We keep our summers very consistent for everyone's sake, but this year she won't be able to go to her usual day camp. I don't know how to bring it up to her. What do I do?" This is a great question, especially for children who may have autism, who are very into their routines and things that they're used to doing all the time. This is going to be really, really important that you talk to them about this as far in advance as possible. I also recommend that when you bring this kind of thing up to your child that you have a plan in place. Depending on your child and their needs and desires, I think that it can be really helpful to either have an alternative that you're already suggesting, such as another plan. So we're not going to go to camp this summer, but we are going to be able to do arts and crafts every day, and picking an activity that they really like, letting them know you have a plan. We're going to do arts and crafts every single day. Maybe that was their favorite activity at camp. Or if they go to, say, a camp where there's a lot of animals, and maybe they go to a camp on a farm or something, saying something that suggests you have a plan to still help them pursue that interest and be with things that they like from the camp they attend. So that's one idea, is to have a plan ready. The other thing that you can do is if you can think of a few activities or several things, maybe there are a few different options that you could really do at that time with them, is giving them a bit of a choice. Some children handle choices better than others, and it's okay to say, we can set up a little kind of water park in our backyard with a hose and a slip and slide, or we can do arts and crafts every single day, or we can do both, and giving them a choice. Again, this engages them in the process a little bit and will help let them know that you do have a plan and you do have structure. That said, I think that it's not going to be surprising if your child is still a little bit upset when they hear about the news. It might take them several times to really talk about it with you and learn that you weren't just saying it one day, you kind of meant it. And so that's why kind of having a plan and then being able to preview that plan for them in the coming days is going to be important. So think ahead about what you might do to fill their summertime. I'm sure you've already thought of some things. And thinking of other activities can be really, really hard. Definitely, especially since you've already been home with them thinking about those hard things. So I think that it's really important to think in advance, plan those things, and see what you can do. It's important to be clear and direct. We can't go to camp this year because people are still sick or the coronavirus is still going on, so that's going to be really important. It's also okay to validate those feelings of disappointment. I know it's a bummer, and then follow it with something exciting. Praise them for handling it well, for coping. Maybe they don't have a complete tantrum. It's okay that they get upset, and you can say thank you for having your feelings with a safe way and a safe voice. So on that note, I think we actually have another question coming in from Patty. And this, I think, has to do with a lot of the similar questions that we're hearing. So I really want to address this. Thank you, Patty, for submitting your question. She talks about her 6-year-old grandson who started swimming lessons on this week, which is very exciting, kind of getting back out there. And he was, a little bit anxious to go. And then by Friday, he refused to go and wouldn't get out of the car. It sounds like that he had a little bit of a behavioral outburst or throwing himself down on the floor and not getting out of the car at all. And it sounds like, Patty, you tried some strategies like taking away his favorite toys and kind of trying some other disciplinary strategies, but that you're concerned that, he didn't end up having to go, and he really didn't. He sort of won this battle, which I think I hear parents and grandparents, caregivers really say all the time. So I don't think you're alone in this. Certainly not. And, especially given how young he is, wondering what to do next. And it's very true. Sometimes having a younger child who's physically smaller, who you can help kind of manage a little bit more, can certainly be easier. And so I think your concern about how is this going to come in the future is a really good one. There's a few different things a few different ways to address this. It sounds like from your experience with your grandson, he's a little bit anxious, and that might be keeping him from getting out of the car. Maybe he's nervous. I would not be surprised if this was the first swim lesson he's had in a really long time, right? And maybe it's his first outing in a really long time too. It's totally natural that kids are going to have some anxiety about this. Certainly, for us adults, going back to work can be anxiety provoking. We're kind of getting used to this new normal for the past few months, and now we have to adjust and change. And a lot happens in a 6-year-old's life in 3 months. So understanding where that's coming from. If it is anxiety, I think that there are some ways to sort of tackle this a little bit in advance and plan ahead. If he has swim lessons coming up, first of all, there's 3 things about behavior that we think about. We want to think about the antecedents, and that comes first. The behavior, that's what's going on in the middle, and the consequences. What you're kind of talking about here, these sort of consequences that he didn't end up having to go and he sort of won the battle, I think is a very valid thing that we hear, like I said, from a lot of caregivers and a lot of parents. And it sounds like there was a response to maybe take away some of his toys and items. Conversely, maybe you can set up a reward system so that he really doesn't have access to those things unless he earns it. And there's maybe slow ways to build up to that. So instead of maybe getting in the car and driving to swim lessons first thing Monday morning, or anticipating these things in the coming weeks, try driving by where the swim lessons are with him. And if he can just go, maybe he waves at the building and he earns a toy just by doing that. These are baby steps. You want to kind of scaffold up and build up his exposure to this very, very hard thing. Next, maybe on a day, again, that he doesn't have swimming lessons, you walk around the building, getting him used to being there again. That may be very helpful. Maybe he's nervous to see a friend he hasn't seen in a while, or his swim instructor that he hasn't seen in a long time, and kind of building up, maybe incorporating conversations with those folks before you go to your swimming lesson may be helpful in easing his nerves and getting him excited about seeing his peers. Then you can work up a reward system. So instead of taking away his toys, once he's done with swim lessons, he earns toys and he gets to earn rewards. And I think that then seeing the positive, having the consequence really be something where he's getting something out of going, is going to reward that good behavior. And like I said, there's ways to sort of build that up so that maybe he gets a reward first for getting in the car and just going to the building. Then he gets a reward for getting out. Then he gets a reward for putting on his brave face and just walking up to the door or peeking in the window. Giving him the opportunity to sort of practice these things. Similar to the mask, you might actually figure out that there's a particular reason or something that he's not liking, and that could help how you approach things in the future. That could help that antecedent, which is preparing him differently for this anxiety-provoking event. And so kind of thinking about all those things in combination and trying to help him build up to the desired behavior and rewarding even the little bitty steps that are going to help him get there might be a good way of starting. I think it's very smart of you to think about, if you start sort of reinforcing or letting him not go to things when you're putting a demand on him or asking him to do something, could build up. One time is not going to ruin anything. So give yourself a break, and it's okay. Every parent, every caregiver has really gone through something like this, and it's hard. It's hard to be a parent and a caregiver. And so just having this happen on one occasion is okay. Think about some of those other strategies you can incorporate for the next time and see how it goes. And again, we're always here, so check back in with us, and we'll see how it goes in the future. We have one more question here from Janice. Janice says that my 10-year-old son shows a lack of motivation. His teacher tells me he is bright, but if I don't talk it through, he just sits and does nothing. What can I do to help him? Well, Janice, I think this is a great question. You you know your child well, and it sounds like your child's teacher also thinks that he is very bright, but you're noticing that maybe something is getting in the way of his ability to complete tasks. This could be a variety of different things. Honestly, there's a ton of different hypotheses we could have about what's going on. If this is a new thing, if this is something that's just started recently, all of those things might impact what you can do to help him. But I think first and foremost, what would be really important is talking to a professional and trying to get an evaluation. Think about the patterns you're observing. Does he lose motivation around certain subjects? Is it around certain times of day? Is it around certain things where maybe a particular teacher, he's really losing that motivation that you're saying? Or is there some other challenge for him? Maybe reading has always been hard for him, but now as the demands are increasing and the reading tasks are focusing, instead of just sight reading, maybe if he's 10, it's probably focusing more on reading comprehension and pulling topics out of what he's read to formulate things like writing paragraphs. Or math problems, for example, are going to get a little more complex. You're going to have a word problem and then have to deduce what to do with that word problem. So it could be that there is something that is getting in the way of him being able to perform to his fullest potential, and that might be impacting his motivation. You know, when we're having trouble with something, when it's really difficult time and time again, it can be really, really hard. There are also other things that could impact someone's motivation and sort of academic abilities, like changes in mood, anxiety, things like that. And all of those things are important to look out for. So consider if you've noticed, is he sleeping? Does he seem to be eating as much as usual? Is he as physically active as usual? Is he finding things that he used to find interesting still interesting? All of those things are going to be important patterns to notice. And then you can certainly try to talk to a professional. Have them help you put these pieces together and determine what the next best plan of action is. Potentially, it's going to be starting a therapeutic process, but also it could be starting an evaluation online, which given everything that's going on, although it's tricky and new, we've been having a lot of success doing telehealth evaluations, and I think that could be really promising for him. So I think the first step, like you're doing exactly right now, is asking for help. What can you do to help? I think noticing those patterns and trying to reach out to a professional, talk to his teacher, see if they notice any patterns as well. But the fact that you're so attentive to his learning and his needs, I think, is just a perfect step in the right direction already. And you are clearly doing your best to help him. And I think that with that support, I think he's on the right trajectory. You are there to help him with all of that, and that's really great. The other thing to keep in mind is, depending on where you live, the school year may be ending, and it could be tempting to kind of pull your foot off the gas and try to give him a break. And maybe he really does just need a break. But also consider how to continue to incorporate some of these tasks and do some maintenance of these tasks over the summer. There's a lot of great suggestions online. I know that our Learning Center at Child Mind Institute has a lot of great resources on things that you can do to really try to continue to see how his motivation goes over the summer, so that he's not just kind of getting a total break and not practicing these things. So then when it comes back to school in the fall, he's not sort of startled and overwhelmed. Using this summer really to be a productive time to figure out what you guys can do to help him. I think ultimately, often when children feel rewarded, when they feel like someone finally understands what's going on in their learning and why it's so difficult, they actually regain some confidence and motivation. They suddenly understand why maybe some of these things are more difficult for them, and it can be really, really validating for them to have a professional help them and you understand what's going on. So Janice, thank you so much for submitting that question. I'm glad you're here, because you really did come to the right place to try to get information to help your son. So thank you very, very much. With that, I think we're going to wrap things up for today. We definitely have other opportunities to answer your questions, so certainly if we didn't get to them all, please tune back in. I really want to thank you all for joining me. I hope it was helpful, and remember, we're here every day to support you in this extraordinary time. The Child Mind Institute is here to help with the mental health and parenting needs of this coronavirus crisis, no matter where you are. So please visit thechildmind.org/telehealth to learn more about the incredible variety of remote telehealth resources we have available to you during this time for children, teens, and young adults. Be safe, and thank you so much for joining me.